So a very warm welcome to the first Change Conversations of 2022. Really excited to kick off this series of events again. For anyone who is joining us for the first time, Change Conversations is a series of events that we've been running at the Good Agency for charities and not-for-profits designed to provide much needed inspiration and stimulation in the sector. It's no longer the start of the year, so I won't wish you a happy new year, but I do know that we're all still wrestling with many, many changes, and we think it's good to talk through that change with a great conversation. So in today's event, we're going to be exploring 2022 and what the year has in store for us. We'll be exploring where we think we are now, some of the big trends that we might look out for and that we think are going to be important in the sector, what's keeping our panelists awake at night, because these are the very people who are steering and leading some of the important organizations in the sector. How can charities keep up with changing public sentiments, because so much has changed? And how can we all keep ourselves motivated? Because that is a really important thing. So we are the Good Agency. We're a strategy and creative agency, and we're all about working for the world. We were set up 26 years ago to help charities, not-for-profits, and businesses to be a force for good. And today I'm joined by a fantastic lineup of panelists, each with a very unique voice of leadership representing a very different cause. And I should say that there has been a little bit of a change to our lineup, because originally we had signed Polly Neat, who is the Chief Executive of Shelter, but unfortunately she was unable to join us because she had an accident. So on behalf of Good, we are wishing you a very speedy recovery, Polly. But actually, we do have a dealer who has been parachuted at the last minute to save the day. So thank you so much. But let me introduce our panelists now, because we've got a fantastic lineup. So beginning with Linda Thomas, who is the Chief Executive of Macmillan Cancer Support. A very warm welcome, Linda. Thanks so much for joining us. Linda was appointed Chief Executive in 2015, and she has extensive experience in communication and fundraising. Linda is also chair of the NHS England Cancer Programme Charity Forum and a member of the NHSE National Cancer Board, NHS Assembly, the Richmond Group of Charities, and the Cicely Saunders Institute Advisory Board. So a very warm welcome to you. Next, we have Matt Stringer, who is the Chief Executive of RNIB. So a very warm welcome to you, Matt. Great to have you. Matt joined RNIB after 30 years in the retail sector, and he held senior leadership roles for very well-known high street brands like Marks and Spencer's, Carphone Warehouse, and Mothercare, and also spent some time in retail consulting at Accenture. So a very warm welcome, Matt. Next, we have Nick Daniel, who is the Marketing Director of Dogs Trust. A very warm welcome, Nick. Nick has been with the charity since 2014, so almost 8 years. Prior to that, he was a senior planner at The Gate, which is a creative marketing and communications agency. And he's also been head of individual giving and legacies at RSPCA. So he's got extensive experience both in the third sector, but also in marketing and communications. So really looking forward to having a chat with you, Nick. And finally, but by no means the least, we welcome Adela Worley, OBE, who is the Chief Executive of Charity Comms. Adela has been the CEO at Charity Comms since 2017, and she is a passionate advocate of the positive way in which strategy and communications can help drive social change. Before that, she led the development of organizational communications, brand, and also audience strategies for Friends of the Earth. And she's currently helping to coordinate the campaign Never More Needed to help promote the essential role of charities in crisis and how they can help shape our society moving forward. So we're about to start now, but I'm just going to do a little bit of quick housekeeping before we get into it. We've got 164 of you in the room, so it's a big audience. If you're having any technical difficulties, there is somebody on standby to help you. So please message Good Agency. The username is Good Agency. We are recording the session. We will make it available to anyone who requests it. So all you need to do is send us an email at hello@goodagency.co.uk, and we will make sure that you get a recording. Comments and questions, please do put them in the chat. I'm going to be checking them throughout the session. I can't promise to get through all of the questions, but I will do my very best to read some of your questions out towards the end. So let's get into it. An extensive array of experience, different sectors, different disciplines, different causes, but perhaps there will be a red thread throughout the conversation today. I never know, because we never know how these conversations go, but I would love to begin the conversation with some personal reflections, because I think that's always nice and a nice way to start. So I'd love to ask our panelists, given the last 12 months that we've had, with many changes coming up, what's it been like for you personally leading your organizations? What's been the biggest thing that you've learned over the last 12 months that is now helping to shape and inform your leadership? So I'm going to ask that question firstly to Linda. Over to you.
Thanks very much, Nilesha, and hello everybody. It's lovely to be here. So the last 12 months, I say they've been pretty exhausting, actually. I think the first 12 months of the pandemic were exhilarating, and we were kind of in crisis mode, and everyone loves a bit of a crisis. Whereas actually the last 12 months were pretty exhausting. And I think we had to really remind ourselves all the time of the purpose of the organisation. So when you say to me, what's been the thing that's got me through it, and what's my leadership been like over that time, it has been remembering those people that we are here to serve. I personally am somebody that kind of thrives on energy, being able to be agile. I quite enjoy a little bit of a problem, thinking how we're going to tackle that. It does really work for me. Certainly the pandemic has meant that I had to use the other side of my brain. So the bit that I'm really comfortable with is communicating and being able to talk to people and donors. I really don't like particularly spreadsheets and numbers, and had to get used to dealing with that. So I think as leaders, we had to be very agile during this time to be able to do a little bit of both. But on a Monday morning, if I ever felt like, oh gosh, I'm not sure I can survive this week, I would just remind myself that on Monday, 1,000 people will be diagnosed with cancer, 2,000 on Tuesday, 3,000, and so on and so forth. And I think that's always really helped me in terms of my work and my leadership, just remembering that it might have been a whole range of things for me as a leader and for people in Macmillan, but actually it's been consistently poor for people living with cancer over the last 2 years, and their experience has been terrible. So always going back to that purpose, I think, is something that I hold really dear. And I hope I do more of that now than maybe I did pre-pandemic. I think I do. So that's probably what I'd say.
Yeah, so reconnecting with your purpose is definitely a wonderful thing. Nick, over to you. Your reflections, please.
I suppose the big thing, I think, an enormous sense of pride for the ingenuity and innovation of the teams and how they've adapted to the rug being pulled out from under their feet on an hourly basis, which is fantastic. I think you sort of said what keeps you awake at night in there as well. And I think there's a couple of things. It's, I suppose, as we come out of this, touch wood, is combating the isolation nature of this and how we come together and drive culture again as we come together in a different way. And the second piece is that how do you build upon that ingenuity and that innovation? We've gone through quite a huge degree of change projects to try and create systems to help us going forward. But we decided to change pretty much everything at the same time. So how are we going to land that and help people develop going forward?
Yeah, I think keeping up the momentum and keeping up with the changes to ways of working is a big conversation in its own right. So let's come back to that, because I think that's really important. Keeping teams motivated, I think it's really important. Matt, over to you.
Yeah, a bit like Linda, I think the first 12 months were more of a sort of potential existential crisis for us as RNIB. We were going through the depths of the statutory inquiry at the time, which we managed to exit in the second 12 months. So, by the second 12 months, things were a bit steadier and probably potentially a bit staler. I think there's three things I think sort of have been the focus in the first year: customer, staff, and cash. Because we need to make sure we had the money to survive, and it was pretty uncertain maybe in the first 6 months of COVID that how is fundraising going to go, how are we going to get on from a cash flow perspective. I think as that settled down, customer and staff focus were pivotal. you know, to Linda's point, reminding ourselves that we're here to support blind and partially sighted people. And there were some real challenges through all the stages of COVID in the UK, initially around information, accessible information, access to services, nervousness at going out into society, social distancing. If you're blind and partially sighted, could you be guided? All these sorts of questions. Last year, more of a focus on accessible testing and vaccination. So, you know, some critical elements in COVID in sort of year 1 and year 2 that I think, you know, again, to Nick's point, sharpened our nimbleness and agility and really reinforced the need to support our customers. I think from a staff perspective, we have about 1,200 employees in the RNIB, mostly dispersed around the UK, you know, many, not all, but many working from home. And I think, you know, the real focus on communicating and trying to put an arm around staff. We did a lot around well-being, you know, on a variety of topics, mental health, financial health, you know, spent a lot of time on communication, which was critical. I do a weekly video, which I think you've probably got tired of seeing my mugshot every week, but I think actually these things matter. It's genuine and people want to see that someone's connected and you're going through the same things, you know. And if I'm talking about taking my dog for a walk as much as I'm talking about the purpose of the organisation, it makes you feel a bit more real, I think. So I think, you know, first year cash, customer, staff, second year customer and staff will be the big focuses for us, having exited the statutory inquiry in the first year.
Really interesting. And Adila, a very different perspective, your reflections.
Yes and no. I really do. Some of those themes that Matt and Nick and Linda have identified really resonate with me too. First of all, I just want to say thank you for having me. Polly's shoes are very big ones to fill, and I'm full of admiration for her. Even though she had an accident, she took the opportunity to thank the air ambulance and RNLI for saving her, which is, you know, she never switches off.
Extraordinary. Thank you. It's wonderful to have you. We always love to have you. So thank you.
Yeah. So I think echoing Nick's comment, really, I know so many people have lived through very difficult times through the pandemic, but for me, leading charity comms, I have a huge sense of inspiration of how the sector responded, and just a sense of pride, really, in what we were able to do individually and collectively to support those people who most needed our help. And Charity Comms, we're here for comms professionals, and we took a decision, and my trustees took a decision to support me in helping Charity Comms to step up to the plate, to really be walking hand in hand with communicators, because we knew that they were working all the hours they could to champion their causes, to do external campaigning, but also to do internal comms, because that was such a vital function for charities during the pandemic. So for me, it's been a mixed feelings about really painful watching the suffering that many people went through, but also pride in my team. And I'm going to boast, because my team were awarded Membership Team of the Year last year by Memcom, and it's so well deserved because they worked their socks off. And then on a personal note, I think I had to be reminded, or to remind myself, about resilience for me as a leader. And actually resilience is it's not an inherent trait, it's a learned skill. And that the more that you practice it, are conscious about looking after yourself, your mental well-being and your energy levels, that you can do it. It's not something that you're God-given. It's something that you can learn and practice. And the last thing I'd say is about showing some humility and humanity. And I think going into the pandemic, I was probably one of those CEOs who tried to be perfect, to try and answer everyone's questions and have all the answers, and to look like I was made of Teflon and nothing brought me down. But actually, in the last year and a half, I hope that my team have seen a more human side to me, and I've actually been able to show some vulnerability. And I hope that that's encouraged them to do the same, so that we can support each other. So yeah, some personal reflections from the last 18 months.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because I've asked this question to many organizational leaders, and the consistent answer is that everyone is just in awe of the support they've received from their teams. And And I'm also in awe of some of the support that I've received from my team. So let's move on to a bigger existential question then about the sector. And given the changes that we've gone through and some of the shifts that we're seeing in society, so for example, the rising cost of living is a big thing. It's really affecting so many people. Changes in donor, consumer sentiments, culture wars. Where do you think, from your point of view, we are, and this is from your leadership perspective, not necessarily from your cause, but from your leadership perspective, where do you think we are right now as a sector, and what are the biggest challenges you think that we face this year collectively? And Linda, I'm going to come back to you to begin.
Yeah, thanks. And I think it was really interesting coming back after Christmas, because we gave everybody 2 weeks off over Christmas, or pretty much, because we managed to wangle things around a bit and gave some people some extra holiday, and just seeing the difference in people when they finished at the end of last year to when they started again this year, and just energy levels rising again. But I suppose I'm mindful that I feel as a sector we've done a pretty good job actually, and we should all be so proud of the work that we've done. And on the whole, I'm hearing from most organisations that from a financial perspective, and I think Matt spoke to this, we've come through it. So we've just closed our books on 2021, for example, at Macmillan. We've had a much better year than we expected, and in fact we've had a much better year than we had in 2019. So if we could be so brash as to say, actually, hopefully the worst of the financial part is behind us, it then leads us on to be able to really have some interesting questions about, well, what does that mean? I think from our perspective, there's a few things we're really thinking about. Supporting our people in 2022 is going to be really interesting, I think. How are we going to deal with the fact that quite a lot of people haven't moved for the last 2 years? So are we going to see people doing a lot of moving and shifting around the sector? And we may well, there's that talk about the Great Resignation. So therefore, from Macmillan's perspective, what's our point of difference? Why are we an amazing place to work? What is the reward strategy for the organisation? How can we really support people to be able to be at their very best and to want to stay with us? So that's something we're really mindful of. Like everybody else, and if anyone's got any magic answers, I'd love to hear them. We are grappling with, is it office first? Is it hybrid? Is it home first? And how do you probably get a good balance of all of that with the very different preferences that people are going to want to have? So there's a lot of work to be done there, I think, which is both exciting and slightly daunting. And I think running through all of that and everything we do as well, we've had a big focus on EDI for the last 18 months. We had a bit of a wake-up call when George Floyd was murdered, that we hadn't got the things in place that we would have liked to have had. I don't want to be back in that situation again. So publishing a new EDI strategy last year was great. Delivering is the name of the game this year, and really making sure that we've got 3 pillars to that. What do we look like in the organisation? How do we feel? What is our representation, both from a race, disability, sexuality perspective? What services do we offer? People affected by cancer come in all shapes and sizes and colours with all sorts of protected characteristics. What are the services that we're offering, and how can we do better in that space? And then there's something around our fundraising and marketing and communications as well, about what's the image that we present to the outside world. So we've got a load of work happening there, and just really making sure that that is front of mind for everybody. And then I think going back to the purpose as well, given that we've been blessed enough to being able to have a really excellent financial year last year, and the world looks rubbish if you're living with cancer, how do we accelerate our spending? How do we get the investment that people have made in us as a charity out there to the people who need it the most as quickly as we can? So I could talk about tech, I could talk about innovation, I could talk about sustainability, but let's leave that to everybody else, and I'll leave it there if that's all right, Nilesha. But yeah, those are some of the things that we're grappling with.
Yeah, that's great. And Matt, over to you.
I think going into this year, I think we're probably all feeling COVID is settling down a bit, which is a good thing. I think the things that we probably couldn't see a couple of months ago that come more sharply into focus, how's the political shenanigans at the top of the country is destabilizing. Lots of knee-jerk things going on. Some geopolitical issues, in Eastern Europe, Ukraine, potentially have an implication economically on energy and stock markets. So there's a whole lot of uncertainty which might not be on our domestic door, but actually could impact us. I think building out the things we've talked about, lessons learned over the last 2 years. I think for us, I think you've got to, on the one hand, everyone's tired. I do get that, but I think also we need to go forward energizing the organisation in achievement. And for us, we're in good shape. We've weathered the SI. We're in good financial shape because of various things we've had to do in the last couple of years. And I think for us, it's those twin focuses of our customer and making sure we deliver for our customer. And there's a ton of positives we've taken from the impact we've had over the last 2 years, which is infusing our forward strategy. So I think that's massively energizing for the organisation to feel, having had sort of 3 years of introspection, we can go forward and actually make a difference for our beneficiaries, which is a real shift in focus and tone for the organisation. Then I think staff, I'm just echoing what Linda was saying there. I think we've done a reasonable job, and the scores would bear that out. But we want to make the RNIB a fabulous place to work for all our staff, a place where you can really make your career. The RNIB, you're well looked after. We develop talent, more than fair reward and recognition, all of which we've put the sort of foundation blocks in place. But we've got a job to repay our staff, frankly, for the effort they've put in over the last 2 years by delivering on that over the next sort of year or two. So I think, for me, again, it's sort of focus on our customer and our mission, and really making sure we now start to deliver externally as opposed to being introspective. And as we do that, make the RNIB a great place to work. And for all the challenges I've mentioned at the start of my answer outside the organisation, I don't think those will be big enough to derail us, because, I think we're well enough set up to sort of weather any challenges that might come from those things.
Thank you. Nick, over to you.
Mirroring everything that everyone else has said. I think from an internal point of view, I think the Great Resignation is a concern. I think, however, lots of people in the broader sectors will be looking at the charity sector with a bit of I love the sense of purpose.
Yeah.
So I think how do we make the best of flexible working? As an organisation, we're struggling massively with that, because we were very much in the office, whilst maintaining. How do we drive our culture, our point of difference? Why is it special to work at our organisation versus somewhere else? That why do I love the guys in the trenches next door to me? So I think that's sort of I suppose the Dogs Trust introspective. I think you were also asking about what we as sort of a sector people need to think about. I think as we come out of this, obviously, I think there is the risk of what's going to happen with the finances and the amount of money people have in their pocket. But also, I think we've got a challenge of how we are relevant. I think if you look at various pieces that have gone on and the stuff that we've changed, people have more of an individual voice. The role of charity has changed quite dramatically. I think that if Greta taught us anything, is that one person with a sense of purpose now has the ability to drive change. And that also, I think the role of charity is changing. Gone are the days where I give you £10 to solve a big problem for me, because someone like Greta has inspired people to say, should I give £10 to a environmental charity? Or should I become vegan? Should I buy locally? Should I travel less? Should I consume more effectively? And is that more effective to driving the changes I want to see in society? So it's not the how do we make sure people give us money. It's actually how is charity relevant in the world that we're going to live in?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's actually going to touch on the next question I wanted to ask, which I'll come back to, the role of charities and actually how we manage the tension with the short-term need to raise income. But Adila, back to that original question, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
So from a charity comms perspective, like many others, we went through a massive amount of change, and we went from being almost 100% face-to-face events, training, empowering, educating charity, to having to do it all in the online space. We went from being a team that were nearly all based in the office to being 100% remote workers and dispersed around the country. And so I think that was rapid change. There were lots and lots of things that we learned that was really good about it. There were some real challenges in there as well. But I think what we've realized is that we want to take the best of all of that and take it forward and build on it and make it even better. And we want to leave behind some of the old habits that were holding us back. So I think it's been a really profound learning period. And as an organisation, our trustees gave us some investment to bring on board some consultancy support. So we've actually taken a step back and we've said, let's look at what we're here for, who we're here for, and let's ask ourselves those really hard questions about, are we doing the things that will make most difference to charity communicators? And if not, what could we do differently that would get us towards our purpose more quickly and more effectively? Because ultimately, that's what we're here for. So it's been a deep thinking phase at the end of last year, and now we're beginning to plan action plans, some of the changes that we want to make as Charity Comms. I did just want to mention, because it picks up on what all of your panelists have said about investing in people. So really timely to be part of this panel today, because last week we launched our salary survey and organizational culture survey. And some really interesting, very mixed picture emerged from that from a year ago. And although Charity Comms people are feeling tired, they are part of rapid change in their organizations. There's lots of re-strategizing, developing new cultures, hybrid working, and all of those challenges. There's a period of adjustment and learning and testing new ways of working. On the downside, I think there's a feeling that they're not necessarily heard internally in their organizations, that their skills are not necessarily appreciated or understood. And whilst they were actually held in esteem during crisis, some of that is dropping away. And so I really urge all of you to think really long and hard about the legacy of what they delivered and to keep investing in that talent, because you work so hard to recruit great people. You just want to build on that and not lose them. So just sharing some really short headlines from the survey and picking up on what Matt, Nick and Linda have said.
Yeah, I love that. And I also love the fact that you've all talked about reconnecting with your purpose and living your purpose. And actually it strikes me that perhaps that's also the way to re-energize teams, because actually that's why they've joined those organizations in the first place. So let's not avoid the money question then, because that is for me, this is the $1 million question. What is the role of the charity organization now? And there's lots of questions in society about what role do charities play, and how do you manage the tension of living your purpose and providing quality services to your beneficiaries with the need to create and generate long-term sustainable income? It's a big question, but any thoughts and impressions would be much appreciated. Matt, I'm going to change the order a bit and come to you first.
You asked me the money question. It's difficult. Look, I think for us, just talk about the RNIB, we're the one national sort of charity, with the sort of breadth and depth of reach, that can represent and support blind and partially sighted people. So, we've got a sort of unique position there. So, our big strategic shift at the moment is moving from, operating quite a lot of great services, but we've been pretty steady with those. They provide great services on reading services, welfare, library services, our helpline, sight loss advice service, all those sorts of things. But in some respects, the fact they exist is a tacit admission that UK society doesn't work for blind and partially sighted people, because if it did, you wouldn't need those things. So what our big strategic shift going forwards is to go and get society to sit up and take notice of what it means to be blind and partially sighted and to do something about it. And without boring you with all our strategy, we have tangible plans around not only going out with our campaigning and our marketing and our PR, but very concrete steps within employment, education, technology, design to really deliver some numbers that move things very much in the right direction. And I think with that sort of outward-looking, societally impacting strategy, we feel that we can go and engage donors, fundraisers, partners, to really get on board with that strategic shift and want to be a part of it. I think we've got to be cute as where you go and get money. I think the days of expecting for us legacies to keep flowing and individual giving still to keep sort of turning over, I mean, they're big planks of our income and we absolutely can't neglect those, and we've got plans to revive both. But I think we're also looking more carefully at things like our supplier partnerships. We have about 400 suppliers in the RNIB. We haven't been great at account management, getting them connected to our mission and purpose in terms of contribution, not only financially, but also goods in kind, support, technology, fundraising, volunteering, sort of helping us communicate, never mind employment, education. You can see, I think, engaging people who are bothered with your charity on this exciting strategic agenda will bear results, of which the financial side will be part. So, I think we're looking at things quite differently, how we go forward strategically and how that opens up opportunities to bring in different sources of funding.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. Linda, your thoughts, please.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to be able to sit here and think there'll be no need for Macmillan in the future. Unfortunately, we're a million miles off that at the moment. You know, we've got 1 in 2 people going to be diagnosed at some point in their life with cancer, a disease that is becoming more and more complicated to live with every day, which actually is a good news story because people are living longer, but with more complexity. So I see the need for the organisation more than ever. What I do think has shifted is customer expectations. So we've been able to pivot some services during the pandemic, which were online. Why would we go back to doing everything face to face if we can be more efficient like that? And why would we do that if actually our customers want a little bit more of a hybrid world? So I think there's going to be some really interesting data coming out about, well, what do people really want from us? And we have to be able to respond in an agile way, I think. I think our innovation pipeline is looking pretty strong and fantastic, but it's looking at different areas. And again, it has to sort of speak to what's happening outside the organisation and what do we bring back in. So our business model, for example, will it be fit for purpose in going forwards? We rely very much on partnering with the NHS. The NHS is in crisis. Do we sit back and say we'll wait for them to sort themselves out, or what before we get on with things? No, actually, we're looking at ways that we can partner with different people. So during the pandemic, for example, we set up a mental health service with Bupa because they could respond just like that. And we've gone into a commissioning arrangement with Bupa that we've never done before with a private healthcare provider. So I think things like that have been great. To the fundraising question, I think Matt's absolutely right. I think there's certain income streams we can rely on, and I think, you know, when you're a big brand like both of our organisations, we probably have a really good understanding of where the money's coming from and what the pipeline looks like at least 10 years out, which is fabulous. But if we look over time and look at the changing demographics of the donor audience, then we know that that's going to go down. So we are looking at different ways of doing things. We've just set up a social finance model with one of the NHS trusts where we give the money in, but we expect it back, and it's going to be more of a payment by results, and then we get paid back by results. We've never done that before. It's a work in progress. Let's see how it works. But I definitely think doing some innovative thinking around the financial model is really an opportunity. And then finally, just wanted to say there has never been a better time to collaborate with other organisations, in my humble opinion. And one of the things that we saw in the pandemic was the cancer charities all came together. We all influenced with what we called One Cancer Voice, and we will continue to do that. And I think that's just been a brilliant step forward. And again, not going back into those silos and being competitive, I think is going to be really important for us as well going forwards.
Thank you. There's actually a question from a member of the audience, Jack, on this issue of collaboration. So I'll come back to that. But Nick, keen to hear your thoughts.
So firstly, thank you, Matt and Linda, for speaking to give us enough time to scribble some notes down. Thank you for going first. It's always, yeah, absolutely. I think speaking as a charity Dogs Trust, we're quite lucky for our cause area. You know, there's no amount of web technology is going to enable a dog who doesn't have thumbs to open a can of dog food. So you know, there isn't that degree of change that necessarily some of the areas in the sector in terms of service user needs. But for us, we've taken a big step to basically try and get upstream of our problem, to try and say, actually, how do we stop these things from repeating? And there's going to be a huge growth for us in those areas. But to do that, we need to expand our engagement. We need to go past just talking to the small group of guys who engage with the standard core user, to actually how do we touch the lives of every dog and every dog owner. That's a massive change. To facilitate that, we've got to fundamentally change the way we communicate and the things that we offer. So it's got to go from being charity specific or charity centric, what we want to talk about, what we want to push at you in terms of the fundraising propositions that work for us, to one where we're actually customer centric, where we're offering the things that people need. And some of those things won't be income generations, it's driving engagement, to engage that broader audience. And that may not be fundraising, that may be income generation. You know, do we look at other product areas and not just those areas where we've got the current skill sets? You know, does the future hold Cancer Research UK or Macmillan coming up with a line of Hello Fresh equivalents from us to make sure people eat accordingly, to make sure they don't get cancer in the future? Who knows? But those are the areas we need to start looking at. Yeah,
I love that. Adela, your reflection, please.
Oh, that was music to my ears, Nick. Customer-centric, audience-centric strategizing and innovation.
I'm just throwing out some buzzwords.
You can tell you spend some time in advertising and marketing, aren't you? Because it's audience first.
So, I mean, I was taking a look at the Charities Aid Foundation, some of their latest sort of trends horizon scanning. And it was quite nice because it was really very positive. It was very positive about the potential for charities to fundraise because we've come on leaps and bounds in using the digital space to fundraise. And as COVID recedes, we hope many of the traditional routes of face-to-face fundraising, sponsorship events will come back, and the portfolio will have, you know, that diversity in it again. I think you know, it is sobering when you read the report that you guys did at the Good Agency, when you there was a stat from the UK Giving report that you did, which said 43% of Brits no longer think charities are the best way to solve problems.
Yeah.
So you know, telling our story, telling the compelling stories of why we exist, who we exist for, the difference that we make, is going to drive not just fundraising, but everything that we do, drive, exactly as Nick said, that broader sense of engagement. Because the closer we bring people to us, the more likely they are to give us their money, to give us their voice, to give us their volunteering. That joined up way of seeing the whole person, the whole supporter, is really what we should be aiming for, I think. And the last thing I wanted to say about this is, during the pandemic, I think that there's been quite a big change to funder behaviour as well. And so we've seen that the funders have made more resources available during the pandemic. They've made that resource available on a much more flexible basis. And they've also collaborated with each other, forming partnerships, the Funders Collaborative Hub. And I think in many ways, there's something to be really hopeful for, that the message about why we need funding is getting through to the funders as well as to our supporters and stakeholders. And we can build on that we don't lose that momentum and that innovation from a funder sector itself.
Yeah, some great themes coming out: innovation, audience first. I know at the agency at Good, we've been talking a lot about authenticity and honesty. I'd love to come back to, Linda, your point about collaboration, because Jack Watts in the audience also asks a question around this. So I'm going to throw it to all of you. What opportunities do you foresee this year for greater collaboration in the sector? Do you think we're getting better at working together? That's the big question, actually. Linda, I'm going to start with you.
Well, I hope so, actually. So speaking personally, I found being able to collaborate with other CEOs during the pandemic has been one of the most valuable things. And the fact that we've just literally been able to go, we got some news on that, can we share that with you? Or somebody else saying, I've got the answer to your question, can I share that with you? I've just stepped down as chair of the Richmond Group after 2 years. It's now been chaired by Juliet at the Stroke Association. That's 14 charities who all get together, and we've got different long-term conditions. And I just feel the barriers have been broken down in the last 2 years, and I can't see them going back up again. So that is really great. I talked a little bit about the cancer charities all working together. So I think in the old days, what would happen is if there was a significant policy change, government or whoever would get 49 submissions from all the different charities, and then they wouldn't know where to start. Now we have pre-meetings when we're going into roundtables with ministers, and we think about what are the biggest issues, how can we get all of our messaging across. You know, to Adela's point, you know, you've got to be able to communicate and tell your story, and being able to do that collectively and share that actually, so that it isn't just myself or Cancer Research UK who get invited to things, that we really share the load on that. I think that's been really helpful. I think what I would love to see would be some more service collaboration. How can we work in partnership with other organisations to be able to help and support people living with cancer? And just to give you one example, one of the areas that we're looking at is around equity, diversity and inclusion around cancer services. There's no question health inequalities are pretty rubbish in this country, and if you come from certain communities, your outcomes as a cancer patient are so much worse. There is stuff that we can do around that. We recognise that our brand brand at Macmillan can be a real turn off for some audiences. So we are now actively looking and working with organisations that have a completely different presence. So for example, Black women and breast cancer, which is a major issue, not using the Macmillan brand to be able to get messages to those audiences, but being able to partner with another organisation where we support them to be able to do that. So I think there's a load of opportunities in that space that we haven't fully tapped into yet, and I'm excited about what that might offer this year and next.
Nick, over to you for the same question on collaboration.
A couple of areas really for me is one, I think you're right, there's going to be loads of charities partnering up to solve problems, possibly, yeah, absolutely on the service side of things, but possibly also in some of the service areas, procurement necessarily if we work as groups, or actually how we actually respond to the need to change how we look at things environmentally. But I think on the other side of the fence, I think that charities as a whole have a certain model for how we solve change. So we want to see a change to society, so we're going to work with MPs to try and drive change, and that necessarily we suffer necessarily from legislation coming in that isn't being policed, and therefore it doesn't actually drive the change you want to. So I'm wondering whether there's a role for sort of third-party investors and social investment to try and drive change. You look at some of the things where people have disrupted markets, like Kahoot have come in and totally changed the way you buy a car. It turns up, it delivered to you. Could we start thinking the same sort of way? How can we use that sort of level of investment, that sort of partnership, to actually drive some of the changes we want and disrupt some of the markets and change things that we want to bring change to?
And what about commercial brands? I mean, it's worth exploring that as well, isn't it? Because we've got, with the rise of purpose, they are crying out to work with more charities. So something certainly to think about. Matt, over to you.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, three points to make on that. I mean, first of all, I agree with Linda. I mean, I think the worm has turned in terms of charities collaborating and not going back to a world where they sort of defended their own patch and didn't necessarily engage. So from our perspective, we sit very beneficially in two sort of core groups. There's a VI, visually impaired sector group of about 8 charities, ourselves, Guide Dogs, Thomas Pocklington Trust, Blind Veterans, etc. And we've done a lot in the last 15 months on topics such as employment for blind and partially sighted people, and setting up a sort of sector insight hub where we can share our research for all the small societies across the country. And that's something we're going to sort of sign off a plan on Monday at our next meeting. And we sit in the disability charity consortium group as well. And that's a very viable group that's particularly input to the government's national disability strategy. I think within all those, focus is required. The danger is we spray and pray, and I think being a bit disciplined about making sure those groups harness their collective weight around some meaningful issues and don't end up having too many things on the radar is probably a watch out we've learned in the last sort of year. To your point, I was going to say, I mean, I think the opportunity to partner with, non-charity partners, commercial organisations, for us, elements of the health service in trying to progress work on the eye health pathway is massive. And I think the commercial side of things is a massively untapped opportunity, actually. I know from my previous life, you're very kind to reference it in your introduction. I think people don't think about this very much, and increasingly are thinking about it and are trying to find a way to engage with, to make an impact on society. And I think charities could step up and sort of be a bit more ambitious in their commercial partnerships, actually, because I think they're pushing an open door. Maybe the final thing, I remember going to a conference when I just started, and I was looking across about 200 charities there, thinking, we're all there doing a whole ton of services individually, whether it's buying, ink cartridges or stationery or, processing accounts payable or whatever. And there must be some shared service type synergies across the sector, which probably no one has thought able to sort of broach that point because it's quite sensitive. But I think, I'm very mindful that fundraised income is very precious and we should be spending our money incredibly wisely. And I think, if you're looking for sort of element of an opportunity across the sector, it might be to think a bit more imaginatively about how we process some of the unglamorous stuff to do it a bit more efficiently and cheaply, and able to focus the money in on our customers and our teams a bit more. It's being provocative there for you, Nilesha, was my final point.
No, that's fine. No. I think we're back to the people point again, aren't we? It's a theme. That
but I think money is tight in the charity sector, and the economy is only going to tighten as we've seen opportunities to innovate. But I think across the sector, we could think a bit more carefully about where we spend it on things that aren't customer facing, and be a bit cuter at how we spend that money.
Yeah, absolutely. Adela, over to you.
Yeah, just on that last point, I do think that we're sometimes very coy about what it costs to deliver what we deliver, and actually saying what it takes behind the scenes to run those services effectively and those campaigns. We should be honest about that and proud about it too, that we actually do offer value for money, and where we don't, we're looking for ways to be more efficient. It's a positive story. I really am passionate about partnerships and collaborations, and I've got 3 examples that have really inspired me. The first one is one that popped up really recently, which is the collaboration between the international aid charities who launched their campaign #WeAreTheHelpers. And I thought this was just absolutely brilliant, that they are showing people that through their work, progress is being made, that change is possible, and that through people's generosity, through their giving, the humanitarian assistance that they collectively make changes people's lives every day. And it's just great to see all of those really, people from, Oxfam to Save the Children, Action Aid, UNICEF, British Red Cross and WaterAid working together to run a joint communications push to engage the public. Really, really good. The other is one that Charity Comms has helped to coordinate, which is an alliance of over 37 organisations working on online hate and actually driving the changes and strengthening what I really do hope will be a groundbreaking piece of legislation, which is the government's online hate bill, to really tackle an invidious and appalling problem. We know that digital and social can be used for good, but we know that there are certain people who do use it for ill. So tackling that and seeing those organisations work collaboratively to drive that piece of work is really important. And then the last one is a personal one for me, which is during the pandemic, I collaborated, you mentioned it very kindly, Nilesha, at the beginning, the Never More Needed campaign. Well, we've kind of left that behind out of pandemic crisis, and we've moved forward in what I think is quite an unprecedented collaboration across sector organisations. And so the civil society group is now trying to maintain the momentum of cooperation and sharing resources and intelligence, and perhaps most importantly, working to reset the relationship with government. And the levelling up agenda, no matter what you think about it, there is a role for civil society to have a voice on that. We know our communities, we are on the ground, we can help deliver that levelling up agenda so it is meaningful and genuinely transformational. So that collaboration, it's in its early days, but I'm really hopeful that it can achieve something really positive for the whole of the charity sector, but most importantly, for our beneficiaries.
Thank you, Adela. And a shout out to you from Holly Hawkins, who says that Charity Comms report is incredibly interesting. I've shared it with my colleagues at the NSPCC, so thank you. Okay, so we're running out of time, so let's go on to people then, because that's a big question, isn't it? How do we better support our teams? How can we keep people motivated, supercharged, and integrated post-pandemic? And how can we rebuild our culture? I'm going to come to you, Linda, first of all.
Oh, I was really hoping you go to somebody else actually first, so I could pick up some hints and tips. Yeah, this is massive, I think. We're so worried about this. We're having a whole day on it next week, so I don't have the answers as of yet. And we're looking at trends, and we're getting some intelligence from outside the organisation. And I think it is everything from how and where we work to how and when, how we remunerate people. But I suppose it's about engagement, and it's about people feeling that they belong. I mean, I've loved working for Macmillan. I've been here 20 years, and it feels like one massive family. And I think there's something there about making sure that people feel that sense of belonging. I think you made the point at the beginning about reconnecting people with the cause. So whereas perhaps during the first round of the pandemic, we were having webinars all the time when we were just talking about this is what's happening, this is what we're doing. Now we've really handed the webinars over to other people to talk about the great work that they're doing, so that we can inspire people and re-motivate people and re-engage with people. So I think there's a huge job from a communications perspective and an engagement perspective, definitely. But I do think that making Macmillan the best place to work, whatever that looks like, and making people feel that they belong there is going to be the thing that I'm going to try and do the most of this year, and will keep me up most at night if I didn't feel we were doing that. And then I just want to put a shout out as well around changing the dial on the people who work in the organisation. I've done quite a bit of recruitment over the last few months, and I have been shocked by how difficult it is to engage people who are non-white in those recruitment processes. It no longer feels acceptable to say we've tried and failed. So it's not just about bringing recruitment in at senior level. It is actually, what are the development opportunities? How do we second people? How do we start that pipeline off right at the kind of entry level and make people feel that they can see themselves and a career for them in the organisation? Because I honestly think we'll be better able to serve our purpose if we can do that. So it's quite a lot there around people, but it's a massive focus for me and my leadership team this year.
Yeah, it's a big one. It's a big one. And I don't think anyone has any clear answers. We're all trying to work our way through it. Nick, your reflections, please.
I think I said earlier on something about isolation. I found that the pandemic was quite isolating, very isolating, but it's also the way we've isolated. I think the teams have all worked exceptionally hard, but I think they've worked together hard. And I think there's an element of me and my team we're working really hard, but they haven't quite got that broader perspective of togetherness. So I think as we come out of the trenches, have that football match against the Germans at half time, and we need to build that togetherness again, that culture piece. But I think, it's the, everything that Linda said, I can't, it's perfect really, isn't it? It's the how and when we work. The how do we create that sense of belonging and reward from what I actually do. But I think for me, it's that sense of togetherness. Dogs Trust has always been an amazing place to work, doing amazing things. But that sense of yellowness, that sense of let's get stuff done, it's the how do we, that's been there, but how do we do it together?
Matt, over to you.
Yeah, well, I agree with Linda and Nick. It's an enormous challenge. It's very difficult to think you've ever cracked it, and I think it'll just go on being an enormous challenge for us. We've just codified some answers into our employee value proposition, which is a combination of sort of hard and soft elements. I think the harder bit about making sure people feel that sort of some of the basic processes work well in terms of sort of talent management, performance management, some of the sort of HR admin-y stuff, which should just be a hygiene factor, but can cause a whole ton of hassle and can give enormous support. And then a whole ton of effort on the softer side of things, development opportunities, communication, being very empathetic about working practices, being supportive of people, working from home primarily, giving people license to come together in ways that suits them, outside maybe our physical offices and being able to fund that. There's a whole ton of stuff in there that people, would see as being very practical or very empathetically supportive. And I feel quite proud of what we've done so far. But, the big job for us is to kick on this year and really deliver on that employee value proposition. Going back to something I said at the start of this, I think just basic communication. My slightly hackneyed weekly video still seems to score the highest in terms of.
Oh, does it?
Apparently so, which might say something about the other comms we have. But simple point. I think people like people, and I think even if in my previous career in retail, management by walking about, getting out on the shop floor, getting out in the warehouse was massively important. And I think for all of us with dispersed workforces, getting out and seeing people as much as we can, making people feel cherished, really bending over backwards to put in place those communication channels, updating on plans and strategy, making people feel they're involved, their bit is vital to what you're doing. All those things, slightly trite, but they never go out of fashion. And I think, just doubling down on those through this year is going to be really important as we settle into whatever the new working rhythm is.
Absolutely. Adela, your reflections, please.
Well, I find it hard to kind of say something new because I totally agree with what the panel has said about this. But I suppose one thing is that I found it really important with my team, and it's not easy in working remotely, is to create spaces for conversations. So when we're working together, it's being able, in a work meeting, I think it's about genuinely listening to what you're hearing from the team and from your colleagues, and making it a conversation rather than a one-way broadcast, which is all too easy to do when you're working remotely. So I think that's something to bear in mind. I think the not having physical proximity, not being in an office, there are things that we've definitely lost, that ability to kind of riff off each other, and the social friendship that you get when you work, certainly in my small organization, is really, really important. And, you know, rebuilding that in digital space is really challenging, I think. And it did make me laugh the other day, something I hadn't even ever thought about, but some of my team have been recruited during the pandemic, so I've never met them face to face. And apparently one of my apparently one of my team said to their team leader, I don't know how it came up, but they said, oh, you know, Adila's about 6 foot tall, isn't she? And they just absolutely burst out laughing because I'm 5 foot nothing. And I thought that is just hilarious. It made me realize that what you project on Zoom is so different from what reality is. And when we do meet up, we're going to be all of us in for some surprises. But it was just a very funny moment. And then the last thing I'd say is that, you know, we've really recognised the toll on mental health and well-being. And so trying to develop a culture which gives people flexibility and space to deal with their lives around work, and also to you know, have access to an employee assistance programme for confidential counselling and advice when needed, and giving people the time that they need to deal with things that always come up. You know, beyond the pandemic, just life throws up all sorts of challenges. So being empathetic and compassionate employers, I think, is so important. So yeah, that's it from me, Nilesha.
Thank you. Well, we're almost at the end, and I thought it'd be really nice for you to share a message of inspiration or hope for 2022 to the audience. So if there's one thing that you'd like your audience to take away from today, what might that be? Linda, I'm going to come to you.
Great. So 2022 is going to be so much better than 2021. And we are going to make such a difference to the lives of the people that we are here to make their lives better. And hopefully we're going to have a lot of fun doing it on the way as well. So I'm going to keep that in my heart this year, to enjoy what I do and try and remember that we're making a difference. Thank you, Linda. Matt, over to you.
It's a tough question, isn't it? Undeniably better year than last year. I think, look, I mean, three things, you know, real focus on our purpose and our customers, because I think we all get energized about that. Look out for your teammates and colleagues, because I think, you know, bringing people on and supporting people is going to be, you know, something we all take a lot of benefit from and is beneficial in itself. And the third thing is just make sure you get some balance in your life. And he says that as someone who's just booked a holiday in the last week. You know, make sure that you get some balance in 2022 and step away from the laptop occasion as well.
Absolutely. I think we're all zoomed out, aren't we? Nick, over to you.
Apologies, there might be the small groanings of a puppy in the background. It's 1 minute to dinner time, so apologies for the noise in the background. How I can inspire her would be crack open the dog food. I think it's just, I think where I started, which was I'm amazed by the ingenuity. It's a really inspiring thing of the things that we all achieved as a sector, and actually I'll speak to my team if there's any other call, achieved during lockdown. And I'm really hoping that 2022 we don't stop. You know, I think there's a real chance that if we carry on with that, we can actually fundamentally change the things we do and have even greater impact.
Hold on to that. Adila, final message.
So I'm picking up on a theme that's run through the whole session this afternoon, which is that nobody achieves anything on their own, that by working together, we can share common cause and we can really make a difference. So that's it from me.
Thank you. And that is the red thread that I was looking for. So thank you for drawing the threads together. That's it. We've run out of time. I could easily go on for another hour, although I'm sure you won't want to. A very special thank you to our audience for taking the time to attend the event. And I can see many repeat audience members. So thank you so much for taking the time. And thank you from Good for continuing to support us, because we really do appreciate it and we exist for you. So we're very happy to put on these events. But a very special thank you to our panelists, to Linda, to Nick, Matt and Adila for joining us, taking the time out of your busy diary. Do watch out for the next Change Conversation. There is another one coming up in spring, but until then, look after yourself and look after one another. And I hope to see you next time. Thank you very much.